did at AdStage, and I think there's quite a few folks that are starting to write about this, is we actually formed a team called our marketing team. So on a weekly basis, we would have our sales and marketing teams meet together. We're a small startup, so it's a little bit easier. Another thing that Jay mentioned is that the smaller an organization, it's a little bit easier to bridge this divide. But basically on a weekly basis, we'd have our sales and marketing teams jump into a room together, and they would chat about a variety of things, right? They'd talk about lead quality, they'd talk about new opportunities, they'd talk about collateral that they don't have. Just having that interaction across the table was critical. It's how we started actually moving the organization forward to always think about sales and marketing as one unit, right? One organization. I know it sounds cheesy. It's like a sports team, right? We got to work together. We got to make sure we're playing the same game. But it's so true, and it's really not hard. It's actually quite easy from the perspective of just starting the conversation. So I think one of the most practical things you have to do here, so this sounds great, right? I'm kind of feeding you guys the Kool-Aid. Sounds great. We should do it. My revenue is going to go up. But how do I practically get this started? So one of the biggest frustrations that we had at AdStage when we first hired our new VP of marketing, and Pallavi's great. She came from really big companies. She came from HP and GE. And remember, we're an early stage, scrappy startup. We wear hoodies and we spill on ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And so when we had her join, it was kind of a culture shock for her, for sure. But I think the biggest thing that she helped us see was we were all speaking a very, very different language, right? We had a doc on the sales team where we defined opportunities. We defined different opportunity stages. We defined an SQL. We didn't have an SAL or an MAL, right? But what was interesting was we were all a little bit off. I think generally we understood what those meant. Sales qualified lead, opportunity, right? We understood what those definitions were at a baseline. But every organization has a nuanced definition for each of those. And the nuances are where the specificity is. And that's where you really start to qualify who owns it, what tactics can help with it. And so the very first thing that we did in one of our marketing meetings that we had every week was we put an SLA together. And it was really simple. We went through definition by definition, hashed it out, poked holes in it, and we made sure that we were all committed to it. The sales and marketing teams were both fully committed to it. One, communication is critical for business, and so we're able to communicate a lot better now. When we throw out an SQL, we know exactly what that means. There was always like a 5-minute conversation before that about what it really meant. Was that an SQL? Was it an MQL? And that kept happening. So now it's there. It's in our employee handbook. So when people join the marketing and sales side, they have these definitions available for them. And it's ingrained in every single person. So communication's better. We're all driving to the same numbers. And then when I stand up and have our OKR planning, and I say we're going to drive this many more SQLs or this much revenue, they can work backwards, and we can come up with a KPI that we can all drive to. But this SLA is critical. It's a physical thing. It's a Google Sheet for us, or a Google Doc, rather, and we all adhere to it. The other thing that's really interesting is that a lot of marketing organizations, and I think this is one where we have to change as marketers, will often be very data-driven, right? We all call ourselves data-driven marketers, and we'll dig through a bunch of data to build out these personas. But what was fascinating with a lot of organizations we work with, they don't actually have the definitions created with sales. They just went through, they tried to find some sort of targeting-based information that they can then take and target on the different ad channels, right? And those were kind of the metrics, or the different characteristics, rather, that they would define a persona with. But the challenge with that is when you go talk to your sales team, if you just talk to them and say, who do you enjoy jumping on a call with? Who do you enjoy jumping on a demo with, and why? And by the way, remember, sales is driven by quota. So they're not going to give some random person that they just had a really good conversation with that's never going to close. They're going to obviously cross-reference with the people that did close, but the ones that were easier to close, the ones that maybe paid them more, they didn't negotiate as hard, they saw the value add, and those are all great characteristics. And those are the characteristics that you have to include in your personas, which you'll then translate over into your ad targeting, right? And we're bringing this back down to PPC. But this is critical, and it's, again, just another conversation. All of this just starts with having that conversation across the table. And you don't even need to have the entire team bought into it. There's always going to be a few folks on your marketing and sales teams that are a little bit more entrepreneurial, a little bit more forward-thinking. They're OK breaking some of the barriers, right? Just start with those folks, and then go from there. And then you have to sell it through to the larger organization or the larger team. So a couple things that happen whenever you meet with your team. So when we had these marketing meetings in place, we actually had a lot of things come out of them. A lot of physical, material deliverables. The first thing was, your marketing team can actually hear from sales firsthand what sort of collateral that needs to be built, or things that they're actually, hearing over and over and over again on sales calls in the field. What can they bring back that marketing can build content around? So you can build out some content pillars around that. What's fascinating, now bringing it back to the advertising side, and I think Thad referenced this too, is digital advertising has kind of changed the entire playing field. I can now take, let's say that I have a couple sales folks and they're doing a couple calls or demos and they keep hearing a recurring theme. I can take that theme, I can drop it into a Facebook campaign, I can test it for 2 weeks and see if it resonates well. And I'll get immediate data back. Or same thing, if I'm running ad campaigns on a digital team and one of our ads is really, really working well, or maybe a few of them are, whatever the messaging in that ad is should maybe get reworked into our sales pitch, right? It has far more reach than my sales team's ever going to have otherwise. And it's a really quick way to test messaging. And that's a really great example of sales and marketing alignment at a really functional level. So as mentioned, on this marketing side, schedule a meeting, have it recurring, get a few people to start, and it's really simple. Get that SLA in place, make sure that you're speaking through the same KPIs, and then you can start to tackle some of the more advanced stuff like we're going to talk about now. But until you have these two teams aligned, until you have the same definitions, it's virtually impossible.